The Mental Health Series is brought to you by Micro Gains and Dominion Strength. Both are longtime friends and sponsors of the Barbell Logic podcast, and neither hesitated for a second in wanting to sponsor a series that they know is incredibly important to so many people. Both companies are true small businesses, American-owned, and 100% of all their products are made here in the United States. You'll hear more about that later in the show. For the finest quality fractional plates, visit microgains.com. That's with a Z, microgains with a Z.com. And for the highest quality leather belts, go to dominionstrengthtraining.com. Both use discount code LOGIC for a significant discount off their products exclusively for Barbell Logic listeners.
Welcome to Barbell Logic. Rewind.
Welcome to another Barbell Logic podcast. I'm Scott Hambrick. We have Matt Reynolds, and we have Diamond David Puder, psychiatrist to the strong. And he's got on a French blue shirt, and his eyes are just popping. If you go to his YouTube channel, you'll be able to see that, and you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. And you'll say, you know what? Hambrick was right again.
That's good. And I really appreciate your overalls.
Thank you.
Bringing it back.
Let me tell you about overalls. Overalls are so good because they don't have a waist. Don't have anything restricting you there. They just hang from the shoulder. It's a freeing experience. When you can do some chin ups and you get a pretty decent deadlift, you get some lats.
You get some tightness out of the deal?
You look like, it's just like if you don't have a great big belly and you got some lats and you show up in overalls, people are like, uh-oh, he's got an axe.
Right. I thought you were going to say you're using it like a squat suit. Like you like squatting in it because you get that tightness from the straps. So you go down, everything gets real tight. You're like, I get 40, 45 pounds out of these overalls.
We call these galluses. And when you squat in these, they will self-adjust. They slide
Really?
too easily and you don't get any tension. Yeah.
It's the closest thing to a pair of overalls I've ever worn is a squat suit. Is a canvas squat suit. Which is pretty close, actually.
Diamond David Puder texted me and he said, hey, you want to do a show about the science of connection? And I thought, I don't know what that is, but I do. So let's do that. Lead us, sir.
Yeah, so it's kind of my research interest specifically in medical education, how connection takes place, the value of connection. So I've been monitoring it in some different departments here in the medical center and actually meet with attendings like myself and talk about ways of improving connection and give them their scores back and how they did.
Wait a minute. What's connection?
I was going to go there. So explain what connection is for everybody that's listening, like what specifically you're talking about.
So when I started out in this, I kind of had a framework of what I thought connection was, but let me tell you what is connection, how I define it now. So connection has 4 components. One is empathy, which is the ability to read someone else's internal world and tell them that you hear them accurately or that you understand them in part. Number 2 would be psychological safety. So the ability for one party, and this is especially really important when there's hierarchy in connection. So if you're a boss, does the person under you feel that they can tell you if they disagree with you or have concerns about something? So for example, in medical education, it's like, if I'm in surgery and I'm a medical student, can I tell the attending if I feel something is off, Then the third component is called different things, but it's like alliance or therapeutic alliance or educational alliance. But it's basically, do we have similar goals? Do we have a bond? Is there an aspect of gratitude in the relationship? Would you judge someone or would you lose respect for them if they made a mistake? Or would you care for them if they made a mistake, like irrespective of the mistakes? So that's alliance. And then the fourth component is feedback. And feedback initially, I didn't think was going to be a part of connection, but what we found in the analysis of the data is that if you scored high in those 3 other things, it predicted how high you would score in feedback. So, feedback is like the ability to give information back to someone about how they're doing, about mistakes that they're making, about the particulars of what they're going through. And so what we did is we built questions based on what the top level, sort of feedback practices are. And what we found is that people who scored high in empathy and would score high in psychological safety and likewise, and they would also score high in their ability to give feedback.
So Why do we care?
Why do we care? So what we found was that as you get more connected, you stress out a person less. So like the stress markers, like the different subjective experiences of the person you're with decrease as you're more connected. Further, we found that the supervisors who were the most connected, the people sought out them for supervision. So there was more hours spent together. And third, as you got more connected, like in a linear fashion, there was improved personal accomplishment, which is one of the 3 domains of burnout. So personal accomplishment relates to, how much do you enjoy your work? How much do you enjoy the things that you're doing? So the supervisors that were the most connected led to, the people working under them having an increased enjoyment in what they did, increased meaning in what they did. Further, what we found is that when connection got really bad, so when the score went from somewhere in the middle to below somewhere in the middle of scores, there was all of a sudden bullying and harassment and prejudice and bias that sort of started popping up. And if you were really connected with someone, that wasn't there at all. So bullying doesn't really exist until there's really bad connection. And then the final thing that we found, which is why it's important, is because the other 2 domains of burnout, which are depersonalization and emotional exhaustion, which emotional exhaustion correlates the strongest with depression and suicidality. And depersonalization is kind of a dissociative state. It's like, I feel numb at work, I feel disconnected. So those ones decreased significantly only when you went from like almost perfect to perfect. So if you're a person that's able to create very, very strong connections with someone, you actually can decrease their emotional exhaustion, their depersonalization. And it's a significant amount to the point that, it's like something we would want to improve, especially if we want to run a company well or interact with people or have relationships. So those are the specific results from the data and the research that I've been doing. And what I'm hoping to do is to be able to teach people how to connect better so that they can thrive more in their different aspects of their life.
So if these people can connect, and it's defined by these 4 areas that you just described.
Yeah, say those one more time for us. The 4, so empathy was number 1.
Empathy, psychological safety, so the ability to receive feedback up the chain, right? So do you feel safe giving critical feedback to someone you're working with? And then number 3 is alliance. So do you have the similar goals, a strong bond, and
are we on the same page?
Yeah.
Right.
And then 4 would be the feedback. And some of the feedback questions are like, this person gave me feedback about specifics, not with generalizations, based on observations, not hearsay. So it's like, do you give them specific feedback? Do you give them feedback like, oh, you just need to study more? Like really generic.
Do better. That's my favorite.
You just need to not suck.
So if we can improve connection and it's measured by these 4 criteria that you described, then everybody around us does better, is more engaged, less suicidal, right? In the context that you're studying, it's in the workplace.
Yeah.
But I'm kind of interested in this just in terms of just the interpersonal outside of the workplace. I don't have a workplace anymore.
How much changes do you think? I mean, when I start thinking about relationships in my own life, it actually feels really similar that those 4 are still kind of the main things. Are there differentiators that you would say, like looking at it from a hierarchical sort of standpoint of somebody who works under somebody or maybe a student and a professor or whatnot? But when I think about this and I think about my relationship with my wife or my relationship with my psychologist or my relationship with Scott or my relationship with Brett McKay, like I think those things are all there. And that's the reason I feel a greater connection to those people, even in my own life that's not really in a hierarchical. I mean, my wife is clearly my boss, but outside of that, we're sort of on a level playing field.
So here's what I would say about that. I would say, absolutely, it's going to apply to all relationships. That's where I got the data from. So I got a lot of the data to lead to this survey and to lead to the research from John Gottman, who does marriage research. I got it from Beatrice Beebe, who does a lot of infant, mother sort of attachment research. I got it from Therapeutic Alliance is one of the biggest predictors of success in psychotherapy. So I got it from that, research. So a lot of the stuff I'm pulling from all different facets and I'm just putting to like a new way of looking at medical education because that's the little domain of change that I would like in particular see take place. But I think this stuff applies. Like empathy is so important And I was just talking with a friend how important empathy is, especially when someone does something well. Like if you think about like you're successful and you tell a friend, and does the friend react with jealousy or competitiveness, where like he's like concealing some micro expressions of anger towards you, but then in reality, he says like, "Oh, that's great, yeah, good job," or maybe he doesn't say anything. Maybe compare that to someone who, when you tell them about a success, they get excited for you, with you, and they really cheer you on. That's going to be a better relationship long term. So sometimes when we think about empathy, we only think about it in the sense of like negative emotions like sadness or anger, but we don't think about it in terms of like the positive emotions as well.
So now I need tips and tricks, man. 5 things they don't want you to know about maintaining connection.
They don't want you to know. So imagine you're like, I've never understood emotions. I don't understand my wife's emotions. I don't understand other people's emotions. Like, where would you start, right? So that's where I've come up with this way of reading emotions and teaching the reading of emotions through microexpression. And on my Instagram and YouTube, I'm starting to release video clips of like fun movie scenes and then analyze them for the emotional content and how to give empathy. So I'm trying to figure out different ways of teaching this, because just doing the app I found is actually pretty exhausting. So I made this app called Emotion Connection, and you can learn how to read the micro expression, but it takes quite a bit of discipline actually to do it for as long as you would need to do it to get good at it. And then once you have that information, like, okay, I can read emotion on other people's face, I can read their body language, then what do you do with that? And so I made 3 episodes in my podcast on how to read micro expression, or after you know how to read the micro expression, what do you do with it? Because when I just learned how to read the micro expression, all of a sudden I had all this information and I didn't know what to do with it, how to empathize, how to sort of...
It's like wearing X-ray glasses or something. It's like, I'm not sure I want to even know all that, David.
Yeah, you do though. You really do. It's like seeing in color when you've only been seeing in black and
I don't
white.
think Scott does, in fact.
You what?
What's that?
I said, I don't think Scott does, in fact. I don't think he does.
Yeah.
I do. I want to learn. So
Yeah, I don't know.
No, one of the things I notice about this idea of empathy, I think we talked about this some on the last podcast, and you and I even talking privately, is that I feel a deep empathetic connection to a small group of people, maybe even over empathetic. Maybe that's not possible, and struggle sometimes with empathy for sort of the macro world, like to hear about... Like, my wife will hear a story or read a story on Facebook about somebody's dog dying, and she'll cry. And I'm like, but I don't know the dog, and I don't know the people. So I have zero empathy there, right? And yet for my family, for my close friends, for my staff, their wins are my wins and their losses are my losses, and I take them really pretty hard, maybe too much. What does a healthy, empathetic relationship look like with someone else?
So I think what you're describing sounds pretty healthy. I mean, if you get sad about every dog that dies, you're just going to be emotionally exhausted. I mean, so the fact that you care about the people who you're around makes a lot of sense to me. I would say, like, if you want to connect with new people, you probably allow yourself to empathize to some degree with them. I remember sitting across from one guy at the coffee shop one time, and all I heard him mention was that someone wanted to use his photos, and I saw a very clear micro expression of anger. And so I said to the guy, "Hey man, I just want to let you know that would be incredibly frustrating for them to want to use your photos." And I had no context. I was just going to try, I was just like, I'm just going to try this out. I'm just going to throw that out there.
He's like, man, he gets me.
The guy turns to me. He like looks at me like really seriously, and he says, wait, and let me tell you one more thing. The barista had no mirroring, nothing. He just was going on his thing. The guy was talking to him, nothing, right? So he turns to me and he says, dude, thank you so much. What's your name? And like immediately he wants to get to know me, hear about my story or whatnot. So it's like, I think the micro moments of like emotion, if you can read them, it's like you can immediately launch yourself into someone's world and gain that connection so quickly. And it's so much fun because like, connection feels good. Like I think from a very young age, kids love being mirrored.
Matt, that was the most Southern California story I've ever heard in my life.
That was fine.
I was at the coffee shop, and this guy didn't want to give this other guy permission to use his photographs. And I was like, that must hurt.
Well, I heard more.
This is the most Southern California story I've ever heard in my life.
Oh man, I should tell more of the story. It's going to sound horrible, but
there's more.
Let's
There's more
hear
to
it.
this
Let's
story.
oh yeah,
Let me hear
But
it.
the guy was a professional photographer. He took these amazing videos and pictures of this person. They gave them to the person. The person put them up. They did really, really well, like because of his pictures. And now this TV company wanted to take his pictures without paying him and put
Right.
them onto their reality TV show. And he was like,
That's even more California. It actually did get more California. It made it onto a reality TV
this was
show.
in Hollywood.
Okay, of course.
But my point is that you can put out a little bit of empathy without hearing the whole context or even understanding the whole context. And I do this for people with schizophrenia. So they'll have a delusion, they'll have fear, and just saying to them like, hey man, it sounds like that would be really, really frightening. I might not even agree with the delusion, but now that person is like feeling more connection, and now they're willing to potentially, take medications to reduce their psychosis. So,
Well, let me ask another leading question here, because some people have to be thinking this because I'm thinking this. You're really, really good at coming across as empathetic. And my psychologist is too. But are you really empathetic, right?
Coming across, right?
I need to ask this question. I think it's an important question because it sounds like a strategy right now in the way you're explaining it to me. And I certainly believe that you're a more empathetic human than I am in general. And we're both light years beyond Scott. Like, he's not even close. I'm just kidding. But the question is, did you really empathize with this guy having his photography stolen? Or was it just a strategy for an end to make a connection with this? And at what point, where do you draw the line there?
okay, so let me just tell people who can't see Matt as he asks that question. As he says, now, is this just a strategy? There's a micro expression of anger that flashes on his face. And so I'm wondering, Matt, are you concerned that I'm just using strategies when I connect with you, or am I a real human being,
Sure. I believe you're a real human being. You and I have done, I can say this, you probably can't say this officially on the air, but you and I have done a session together, like an actual private session. And it was one of the most wonderful sessions I've ever done. And I felt like because very quickly you were able to get to the point where you empathized with my feelings, that created that psychological safety for me. It allowed me to be transparent without feeling, I don't know that vulnerable is a word that I would consider sort of a negative word for me. Like if I feel like I'm vulnerable because I don't know if the feedback is going to be empathetic.
Let's use safe.
Say what?
Let's use safe.
Yeah, I felt safe being transparent very quickly with you. So I definitely think that you are genuine. I believe that you are genuine, but I'm thinking about the people who are listening to this who maybe struggle with this a little bit. Do you sort of fake it till you make it? Do you fake empathy until you actually start feeling empathy?
Okay, so let me tell you a little bit about my own story, okay? So I was more of a somatic person when I was in like high school. So I don't think I was in touch with my emotions at all. Like when I would get stressed, I would get migraines. And when
Somatic
I was in
of the body.
somatic meaning like stress would be represented not as like depression or anxiety, but like I would get migraines, I would get headaches, if I didn't like something, right? So it was like a lot of the stuff that was going on in me was like very unconscious, and there was a big gap between the stress and the reality. So it comes out in a somatic way. I was probably a fairly sensitive kid, like I think I've always been, but I was in a very sort of masculine culture, like football, I was a tight end, wrestling, 4 years, and then rowing for 4 years
Where
of college.
was that?
I did football and wrestling in high school in California. It was
In California.
our team like did pretty good in wrestling. I did pretty good in wrestling. I was pretty into it. The team wasn't very good at football, but then I did rowing in college. And once again, it's a very like, competitive, driven, not a lot of place for emotional expression type of culture. When I got into medical school, once again, it's like very driven, studying all day long, not a lot of place for sort of emotional expression. So a lot of this was completely foreign to me. And so much so that when I was in my third year of medical school, we have to take this test where we interview patients, and they're fake patients. And it's for this board. And I actually failed it. And most people don't fail that. And I think it was because I was very, I could not connect with these people because one, they were actors. I thought it was kind of funny, like when they were feigning illness, and so I had to like learn some of this stuff and learn how to basically get back in touch with my emotional life, because it was like kind of beat out of me throughout my early life. And then I found out that, a lot of what I did growing up was peacemake for my family. So you kind of stuff your own emotions so that you can basically make other people happy. When I was in psychiatry residency, I had this huge growth emotionally because I had to get back in touch with my emotions. I've had 3 different therapists and, over the course of about 7 years. And I think the micro expression was that first sort of inroad to me, because I started to recognize, one, when I would flash emotions on my own face and when other people would flash emotions on their face. And then it gave me that feedback like, oh, I just flashed anger and oh, I have a little bit of tightness in my chest. And so what am I angry about? Why am I angry? Or I just flashed sadness when I'm watching this movie, so it's kind of like all of a sudden, like I knew I was experiencing the emotion, but usually it was very unconscious. And so I slowly had to come to a point where I could bring that into conscious awareness. And a lot of that is from feeling my body, what was going on in my chest, what was going on in my stomach.
Mm-hmm. Well, they call them feelings, we really have experiences of them in different places. But connection, I was hoping that we could talk in some practical terms about how guys might be connected with each other. So we've described a lot about what it is and what the benefits may be. And it's clearly about recognizing emotional states in other people as they come.
We talked about on the last episode of the need, and Scott was kind of giving me a hard time about this need for actual, real, authentic friendships, authentic relationships, especially for men, but certainly for everybody. And we got several emails back, Scott especially, from people that said, man, I heard that episode and I realized I don't have any friends. Like, I don't have any real, authentic relationship friends. And it made me think a lot over the last several weeks about my friendships and my relationships and the people who I hold dear to my heart. And as you go through this, we didn't do any pre-show here, walking through these 4 things that help represent connection. But I have that with those people, right? I have these things with this empathy and this safety and this alliance and this good specific feedback with this group of people, with 6, 7 people in my life that are like, it's incredibly important. They're the most important people in my life that I have those things. And I also then start to think about the people that my relationship, we rub against each other a little bit. And I recognize that those are the things that are missing. And there might be some of those things. Like, for example, one of the interesting ones is the alliance piece, right? Like this common, if I make sure I understand this right, it's commonality of something, right? Is that correct? Am I reading that right? That alliance?
It's agreed upon mutual goals.
Okay.
And sometimes it's not like you haven't verbally agreed upon this, but you kind of know what they are, right?
Sure.
So for example, if you're at church, it's like, okay, there's certain things that we believe and we have goals in our beliefs here, and those things can be binding people together. I'm sure for your strength community, it's like, yeah, we believe in strength above stretching.
Sure.
We believe it's going to help. So yeah, agreed upon goals. And then also with Alliance, there's like a bond, the attachment. And then, there's this kind of like, how do you deal with if mistakes occur? Is there grace or is there sort of judgment and then disdain?
Yeah. Yeah. Alliance feels like the thing that is almost of all of those, all of them make sense, but alliance sort of feels like the no-brainer piece. Like, okay, like, have you ever met the person that you literally just don't see eye to eye on anything at all? Nothing. And because of that, the ability to give empathy to them or to receive empathy from them, and therefore there is no safety and therefore there is no positive feedback loop at all. Like, so a lot of times if there isn't this thing, this that we connect on, if it's not strength training or religion or politics or we're in quilting class together or whatever that thing is. And I remember the first time I met a person like that. Like, I actually remember this, identifying that I met this guy in college who literally liked all the things that I hated and hated all the things that I liked. We were at like a house party. It wasn't a crazy house party. We were just talking and like we would have a conversation like, oh, I like this music group. And you're like, what? Like, they're terrible. No, I like this. And and like everything, this TV show or this thing or this politics or this religion or whatever, that we had zero, we could not find common ground. And I remember we actually were like, hey man, we'll never be friends. We're like, shook hands, like good luck to you, pat him on the back. And like,
you agreed on that.
We agreed on the fact that we would never be able to have a connection. connection. And that was okay. But like that alliance piece, that's a big part of it, right? Like Scott and I talk about this all the time. This like this common value system is so important to be able to have this connection with people. I have such a hard time being empathetic towards people, or even accepting, even if they give me empathy, if we can't find common ground of any value system whatsoever. Like that alliance is a huge piece. And it's almost like the prequel, like has to be there. You have to find that thing before you can get to anywhere else.
The way you said it was, we can't understand each other.
Right.
There's a lack of empathy there. I have patients that have vastly different beliefs than I do. And I think that just, you kind of have to like understand people who think very differently than you in my profession. So I think I can connect with people who think very differently than me. Now, I think I probably won't be friends with that person.
Yeah.
Right? Like if the person is, I could think of a number of things, I won't say it, but judgments that I have on them, I may not feel judgment towards them, and I can empathize with their distress and where they're at and realize they're in process. But, like it's just going to be harder to connect with that person on an interpersonal level in a friendship because there's just not a lot of commonalities. And so, yeah, I agree with you that those things are important. And when you're assessing, is this person going to be a good friend? There's certain things that you will be looking for.
Yeah. Yeah, then what's weird is on the opposite end of the spectrum, there are times when I meet people where I feel like the alliance is incredibly strong. We see eye to eye on all of these things, but all of the other three things are completely missing. Like we see eye to eye about common goals, common things. Like we have this, maybe we see eye to eye on politics and religion and the way we do family and all of these sort of things. And then for whatever reason, there is a brokenness there in the empathy and feedback loop. And so they're like on paper, it looks like it works, but it doesn't work in person. And it makes you go like, this is weird. Like, why can't I get along with this person if we agree about this, and this, and yet I can't, for whatever reason, there's this constant rub that it's not working.
The connection's not there. Yeah.
There's not a lot of those. There's just a few of those in my life, but those, I can remember how frustrating they are. Like, I wanted them to work, but it didn't work.
And, gosh, I was doing some prep work for this, and there was one really interesting thing where they looked at friendship, and they looked at commonalities in friendship. Good friendship, you have, pro-social behavior, so friends help and share with each other. A friend in need is a friend indeed.
Does it really say that?
It says that.
That's the cheesiest bullshit I've ever heard, Puder.
Hold on. Let me get to the part that you were just talking about, though. It was talking about like, what are the commonalities of negative qualities of friendships? Conflicts, dominance, attempts, and rivalry. So, you could be in a rivalry with someone who believes very, very similar to you.
That's a good idea. Yeah.
Because now we're competitors, and, like if their only way of being happy is to be at the top of the dominance hierarchy, and you are right there with them, then they may not have that sort of affiliative,
Sure.
It could be like competitive. And I feel that sometimes with people. Like I have this, it's like I want to abstract myself from so people don't know who I'm talking about. But there are certain people that when I'm with, I can feel palpably their competitiveness with me.
You want to kick them in the teeth rather than be empathetic.
And because I feel that mirror neuron so much, that like I feel so much of what's going on in someone's brain, I start to feel some of that like competitiveness as well. Sometimes when I'm with someone and it's like I'm feeling things or thinking things that are very, very different than I normally feel or think, I start to reflect on my own thoughts and think, what's going on in my brain, or is it me feeling into their experience a little bit? Like what it feels like to be like them.
Have you ever noticed that the smallest weight plates you can find at a gym is 2.5 pounds? One of the things that everyone needs when they're first starting out on their journey of strength is fractional plates. That's plates smaller than 2.5 pounds, so that you can continue to get wins in the gym every single session for as long as possible by adding strength and muscle 1 pound at a time. Mike from microgains.com is a true American-owned small business. All of his fractional plates are super high quality, and all of them are made in Pennsylvania and shipped by the owner himself. So when you support Microgains, You support a real blue-collar American trying to survive and support his family in the midst of a pandemic. There are definitely other fractional plates out there, but none with a story like Mike's. I've used them all, but I use his fractional plates and dumbbell fractional plates literally every single workout. And I'm thankful to have a company of microgains quality as a supporter of the podcast. For the finest fractional plates on the planet, head over to microgains.com and use discount code LOGIC for 10% off any order. That's microgainz.com and use discount code LOGIC for 10% off any order. So Scott keeps trying to bring this back to practicality, so let's hone in for a second. So we've talked about the need for connection and what true human connection looks like with these 4 primary criteria. Where's the place to start for our listeners who are like, I just struggle with connecting with people? Like, where do they start on a very practical level today when they hear this podcast? What can they do to start to connect with other people and make that first step?
So give attention to people that you want to build friendships with. It's as simple as that. So let's say you want to build connections with your kids, but your kids are like, post-college, you feel disconnected from them. Giving them attention, consistent attention over time that's not expecting anything in return is the best way to build friendships. So, going to a coffee shop with another dude or someone you want to be a friend with and, finding out what they're into and listening to it. Attention. If they're into weightlifting, listen to their thoughts on weightlifting without pushing down their throat, the correct technique of squatting and deadlifting quite yet, right? Listen to them first.
Quite yet. Wouldn't invite them over to squat.
Yeah. I think attention is one of the key aspects that we can actually control. Your wife, I know my wife will get upset if I don't come home and give her attention for a good 15, 20 minutes. It doesn't take a lot of attention, but it takes okay, we're going to sit down. I'm going to listen to you. I'm going to listen to you, how your day went. I'm going to try to, empathize with you, which is showing her that I'm listening and understand her to some degree, right?
And you don't set her down and say, okay, it's empathy with Diamond Dave time.
No, dude,
we're going to do 15 minutes. And, no, you don't.
But you also don't ask her about her day and then get on Facebook on your phone and start scrolling through Facebook. Right, which is the reality of what happens today. I think maybe we mentioned this on the last show, the idea that you go to a nice restaurant where the check is going to be relatively expensive, and just next time you walk into a nice restaurant, just scan the room. 70% of the people will be on their phones, and all of them are sitting at tables with other humans. Like if you're sitting in a nice restaurant all alone by yourself, all right, you can be on your phone. Maybe there's another issue there. But so that's the deal. I mean, for me, I know attention for my wife, this quality of time for my wife and affection, same thing without anything in return, right? Again, if we be honest, guys are kind of constantly looking at affection is often the means to an end. We're getting to sex, we're getting to physicality. And I had to learn how to give affection without any expectation in return of sex or anything else, right? It was just affection because I love my wife and I give her that affection and that attention, and she deserves that undistracted time that I'm able to give her. And by the way, that doesn't come naturally to me. The affection doesn't. And it's been tough because my dad, I've talked about my dad on the show a lot lately, but my dad was very naturally affectionate. And the problem with that is it was great because he modeled it well, but he taught it terribly because he didn't teach it at all. Affection actually came natural to him. And then I remember when I first started dating my wife, and here I'm 17 years old, and I don't know how to give affection at all as a 17-year-old boy. And it took years to really learn how to truly give affection and attention to my wife. And that's all she needed.
Yeah. And that sounds like that's been a learning process and something you've grown in. I'm actually quite surprised to have this conversation at all with you guys.
Let me tell you a few things that have worked for me. You're right about the attention thing and the alliance thing. I mean, you're right about all of it, but those things are pretty easy to generate, really. If you're trying to grow your circle of friends, if you say every Saturday we're going to squat, or maybe once a month we're going to come over, everybody's going to deadlift, and then we're going to eat ribs. And you invite 4 or 5 guys, you do that 6 months and those are your guys. My book group at my home, book discussions, not Oprah's book club, but real discussions about difficult things really can drive wedges in between people. But if everybody comes together and they say, our highest value here is understanding this book, then they can come together and say honest things about what they're thinking. And then everybody holds that same value in their mind. And then we can disagree, but we all know we're trying to do the same thing. So I got 8 or 10 guys that come to my house on the third Thursday. Most of those guys, I didn't know them. A friend said, hey, maybe he would like it. And I invited him. And we've been doing this for about 2.5, 3 years, 4 years now, 4 years. And we've talked about difficult stuff in an authentic way. Nobody's gotten angry, not once in all those years. And I don't agree with those guys about anything. And those guys are my tribe now. We went a couple weeks ago to a cabin in rural Oklahoma and played cards and ate and just visited for 2 or 3 days. And that group of people couldn't possibly be more different. But we've been able to give each other feedback, demonstrate this alliance. And Aristotle says that friendship is only possible between good people similar in virtue, he says. I might argue with that, but seems true. And that it's when you hold the other person's good in high regard and you wish good things for them. And
that makes sense. Well,
that's true. That's true for all these guys.
There has to be a certain amount of character to be able to give attention. There's some people who are so focused on themselves that when they go meet up with someone, they're only talking about themselves. There are people who, whenever they hear anything good about anything in your life, they'll get competitive or jealous, a lot of the sort of negative virtues. So I think it does take a certain amount of virtue to be able to be a friend.
Yeah.
All of these things that you named, it's a two-way street, right? Like it has to be, which is really what you're getting at. There's a cycle that occurs here, right? Empathy can't just come from one person and never from the other person. And the alliance is there.
Well, I don't know that that's true. Like, we're really talking about 2 things. One is friendship.
Right.
And the friendship, I think there has to be reciprocity there. It's got to be a two-way street.
Yes. But
you can encounter someone that you find distasteful for whatever reason and have empathy for their being, to deeply understand where they're coming from.
But can you make a long-term connection with that person?
Well, I don't know about a long-term connection.
Puder might be able to, but that's Puder's job. But for the average person, I guess what I'm saying is that my experience has been, and I'll say it that way, is that when when you start connecting with people, you'll find these commonalities that create that alliance. There is co-empathy there. There's empathy for each other. And that opens up the safety to give this sort of feedback loop to each other. Like, I share with you the things that are struggles in my life. It's safe for me to share that with you. You give me valuable, wise feedback, but then you also share the things with me that you struggle with in your life. And it's safe to do so. And I can give positive and wise feedback back to you. And so that's at least the way it's worked in my life, is that most of my relationships work that way. Now, there are some mentors I've had that I'm just like, pour into me, man. I don't have anything to tell you. I don't know anything that you don't know. Like, I feel that way, right? I've had some older generation mentors where I just want to absorb everything they say like a sponge. Now, I empathize with them, and certainly I would create a safe environment for them to share things with me, and they often will share stories that they can relate about when I was your age and when I was building a business, or I was building a family, or I was doing this, and they can do the thing. At the same time, like, giving feedback, I often feel so unqualified to give feedback to sometimes those people.
Well, I don't think, but Puderian style feedback isn't about like here's your report card. It's like, are you being heard? Did that person understand the thing that you were saying? Do they have the skills to let you know that they heard you and that they understood you? It's not necessarily about like a report card, more concrete stuff, right?
So I would say, Matt, you're talking about friendship. Friendship is bidirectional. And if it's only unidirectional, you're going to come into some issues eventually, because you're the one that's only giving, and, at some point you're going to be like, wait, I need to feel heard. I need something I'm going through that's hard. Do I feel like this is a person that I would actually tell this to because of how they're going to respond? So I agree. The connection that I give to patients it's weird. It probably didn't exist a couple hundred years ago. Maybe it did. Like the spiritual leaders, the witch doctors, kind of like how they used to interact with society. But it's very unilateral. And I'm there for their emotional needs, and I'm subjugating my own needs for their needs, and I'm getting paid for it. So it's kind of like what I did as a child, but now I'm getting paid for it, so it feels better.
So let's go back to the work. So talk about how that plays out in the workplace, because that's where we started.
Okay.
How much of it is unilateral versus bilateral?
So what I've found in the workplace is that although there's hierarchies, people feel more connected when the hierarchies are not as experienced as there. They're there, but they're not experienced as there. Meaning like the person on the top of the hierarchy values the people like he values himself. Like it's like he doesn't see the person as less than human just because they're below him in the hierarchy. Now, there are some people who literally like ignore the people under them and experience them as less than human and degrade them. And those are really bad connections, right? But in general, there is a hierarchy and there's respect for the hierarchy, but there's not an experience of separateness from each other, okay? The mentor gives more, but there is this value in reciprocity of experiences, And so there can be like a sharing from the personal life, and there can be a bidirectional thing. In therapy, I think it's different than when you're in like a business leader, like yourself, you're leading a group of people. I think you can have it be more bidirectional. But as a leader, you're leading towards a goal. And so that goal is probably going to stay fairly consistent, So my goal for my residents and medical students I work with is that they would become exceptional physicians and be able to heal people more efficiently and with more wisdom. That goal is not going to change. And so when they stray from that goal, that's where I may give them that feedback. And I'm going to try to make that feedback as specific as possible. But the feedback itself doesn't change how I feel towards them.
Sure.
Like I still value them as an individual. I still believe in them. That allows for the connection to take place within the feedback.
In a small business environment, that showing that the goals are in alignment is very difficult. I owned a small business. That business was created and designed for my financial benefit. That's why we do it. And I had employees that worked there. And I was always very, very careful to show them how the benefit of the business was closely aligned with their own personal benefit, both in, the pay, although I find that people aren't as motivated by money as that the economists would like for us to believe they are, but just also in their well-being, how they would find more and more satisfaction with the job, and there would be more opportunities for them and all of the attendant stuff if the business was successful. And when I was able to do that better, we all did better. And when I wasn't able to do that as well, we didn't do as well, because it's very difficult in a business environment to say, hey, when the third quarter earnings report comes in, then, that's awesome for you. To show that the interests are aligned can be difficult. Although I think they are. I don't think I was lying to those people. I think I actually did design that business to benefit me and at the same time benefit them as well. That was a part of my job as a leader, is to show how that was. And sometimes people don't want to see that.
Man, I have learned so much. I do calls with my staff every month. I take about 10 staff members and we do one-on-one Zoom calls, and there's no agenda on the Zoom call. We just do a call. And if there's certainly not a step-by-step list of things we're trying to follow, but I'm just asking them about their life and how much value they get from working with us, working for us. And I hope they get a lot of value out of those calls. I get a tremendous amount of value out of those. I learned so much from my staff, and to see the value that they get, because Scott and I have talked about this a lot. Understanding who your client is in a business is one of the most important, if not the most important, questions you can answer and understand correctly. And I believe, for me, I was talking about this with Scott earlier today, I don't know any of Scott's online coaching clients. I don't know them personally. I don't know exactly how they're programmed. My client, I don't like that term, but the person that I'm trying to bring value to is actually my staff. And so to understand and to be able to empathize with my staff, man, it means more to me than almost anything else on earth when a staff member can communicate the value that this job has, in quotation marks, air quotes, has brought to them. And then also to give a safe environment for them to give feedback for the places that it's not, that's robbing them of value, so that we can start to look at, well, how can we change that and give you more value? And so, listen, we don't run everything perfect at all. We are a very imperfect business, as all businesses are. But I believe it's very bilateral there. I feel as though I learn a tremendous amount from my staff. Now, I will say, I respect the people who work for me. I respected them as humans more than just about any other humans on the planet, even before they worked for me. That's why they work for me. Right. And so the amount of respect that I have for a guy like Jonathan Sullivan, I just had a phone call with Sully right before this call, is like, it boggles my mind that the guy works at our company, and there's so much to learn there. And so that understanding that value. And so I hope we're providing a tremendous amount of value, not just to our actual paying clients, but to our staff members as well. And so hopefully we create a positive work environment there, and it really helps with staff morale. And I mean, that's my goal. I want my staff to constantly get value there.
Yeah. How can you have a relationship with anybody if you're not leaving them taller than you found them?
Yeah.
You know, can't do it very long.
Yeah.
Can't do it very long. I got a story, Matt.
Yep.
One of the guys that works with me at Online Great Books, like one of the first seminar hosts, maybe the first, I can't remember if it's him or Carl. Carl's the first.
Yep.
Jim is the
I know
second.
Jim because he's in your book group. And
Yeah, Jim.
Right. So I know him.
Yep. Yeah, he's a highly sought after electrical engineer. He's traveled all over the world and made money and been in huge demand. He's 65, and yesterday was his last day of work as an engineer. And he came by the house today, and he said, I couldn't have retired because I wouldn't have known what to do with myself, and this has given me purpose. So I quit engineering, and he's writing a book for us.
Yeah.
He's writing an introduction to logic that can be used in discussion, like in seminar format. And he's like, I'm going to finish it by October 31st. I start tomorrow. And he's like, I couldn't have retired from engineering without something like this to give me purpose, but I needed to for my health, just wrecked me.
Yeah, we've had maybe 18 or so, 16 to 18 of our coaches quit their jobs that they hated in corporate America to do this full time. And every time they do, like, I just lose it and audibly make noise. I cry. And happy tears, not sad tears, because you've been able to figure out a way that brings people value, not just for the client and not just to the owner's bank account, but to the people that are actually in the trenches doing the work every day. It's really, really powerful.
Yeah, it's an objective good.
Yeah.
When we think about value, we think about financial value. That's the thing that most people have come to their mind.
Yeah.
And then we think about like emotional value. Like, how is their emotional life going to be different working for you versus working a 9 to 5? Huge difference, right? And then we talk about, physical value, okay? Like physical health, and I think often we don't really think about like how, if we're in a chronic stressful environment with a horrible boss that we don't enjoy, that's a chronic stress, and that's going to wear on us physically long term. And then you think about like spiritual as well, like how does their spiritual life change? So I think of value in those 4 categories, and often we only think financially, right? But we need to think about all the different ways that we provide value through a service that we give,
I think I could say this, and I'll ask to make sure it's okay before I won't give lots of details, but Andrew Jackson is one of my VPs. He's a guy that's the liaison. He's an incredible coach, lives in Seattle, incredible coach himself, and a super empathetic, great. Scott, you had a phone call with him this week, I think, right? Scott texted me. He's like, man, what a great guy. He left his job in corporate America and took about a 70% pay cut to come and work for me. And that, sorry, it's more than what's in your pocketbook. It's more than what's in your bank account. And I got lots of stories like that. And but that one really struck a big deal because nobody else told me. I knew what a big deal it was. And he didn't tell me to make me feel bad. I asked, as a matter of fact, he didn't tell me. I asked him. I said, I want to know what you were making at your other company. He had already committed to leave. And he told me, and I was like, holy shit. And the guy takes a 65, 70% pay cut to come work for us because he got so much more value. Man, that's a tremendous loss in financial value. But the quality of life improvement was dramatically different. And so it affects me tremendously. So, yeah.
The meaning of what it means to be doing it. Yeah. And it's incredibly meaningful to you, I think, because it shows you that you're doing something that's creating impact. And I think we want to help people. We want to create impact that creates value for us, and him quitting his day job to come sort of join in that. I think that's fantastic.
Yeah. I learned a long time ago that 3 generations from now, no one's going to know who I was or what I did. 3 generations from now, nobody's going to know. Nobody's going to care. Do you know what your great grandpa did? Do you know what your great-great-grandpa did? I mean, 4 generations, you have no clue what your great-great-grandpa did, right? And so if I can make an impact, I don't have this legacy thing that I need to leave a 200-year-old legacy. But if I can affect as many people positively and bring them value, not just our paying clients, but our staff and the people I come in contact with. I want to affect as many people as I can in the positive. And the crazy thing is how much of a reciprocal feeling that is for, like, I get so much value out of doing that. And so it just creates a cycle for us. It's been really incredible. I don't doubt that even if we change, if our business 10X's, I still don't think anybody's going to know who I am 4 generations from now. I just don't. It's very, very few people are Aristotle and Thomas Jefferson. And Thomas Jefferson's probably not even 4. He's about 4 generations. I'm like, it's not that far. But like, I don't know what my great grandpa did for a living.
Well, I'm going to guess farm.
That's one from Missouri.
I'm going to guess Viking.
Yeah, so it's a big deal. So bringing that value is huge. So for sure.
Peter, what do you want our people to do here in the next 24 hours? They've heard this. They've heard us get all choked up. They've looked into your eyes on YouTube.
Okay.
What do you want them to do?
Make a list of 5 people that are good potential for friends. And maybe you haven't connected with them, or you want to connect with them more, or you want to build that friendship long term. Make a list of 5 and then give them a call and meet up, whether it's lifting or, going out to eat, going to coffee, whatever it is for you. I mean, maybe if they live out of state, maybe it's just getting on a video call, but make that a priority in the next week to connect with these 5 people that you make a list.
I agree. And then you're going to have to make note of which one of those went well and then commit to returning to that over and over and over again so that it can pay the dividends for both of you.
Yep. And then, you won't end up like the isolated male. And there
Right.
are a lot of those. We didn't really go into that, but there's lots of isolated males out there that have no friends. So
let's go into this a little bit, David.
Yeah.
We know they're out there. We know that suicide rates are going up. We know that these guys are suffering. What did you want to say about that today?
what I would say about that is at least do this exercise. If you're a dude and you're listening to this and you're like, I don't know who I could say is my best friend at this stage in my life, make that list and start pursuing those people. And if there are no people on that list, then put yourself in environments with good people, whether that's a gym or a book club or a church or a religious organization, put yourself in an environment where there will be that type of person that has the capacity for friendship.
Damn, they might have to go to a CrossFit class.
If that's the only thing in their town, do it. Yeah.
They're so good at community. They really are. And so I think that there are a lot of people that may have just heard that and thought, well, I'm not the isolated male, but I know some of those people are. And some of those people are surrounded by living human beings.
Yeah.
And some of them are married, right? And so it's not about how many people, you say, hey, Steve, to every day. It's about this connection you were talking about. So if you're listening, make sure that you really take your inventory and figure out if you really are psychologically isolated, even though you're surrounded by people.
There is some people who are depressed, and when they get depressed, they will perceive that they have less connections with other people than they really do.
Mm-hmm.
That was one interesting thing from reading and digging in the research is there's a difference between perceived isolation and actual isolation. And perceived isolation is actually more correlated with worse mental health outcomes. So even if you perceive it, then, okay, you should make an assessment. Are you depressed? And if you are depressed, you should get treatment for it. Psychotherapy, psychiatry, there's day treatment programs for depression. You don't have to be depressed the rest of your life. And number 2, build the relationships, give the attention, and start that process.
David, I have something I want you to do for me in the next 24 hours. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
I need you to go get some new business cards made, and they say, Diamond David Puder.
No, it doesn't need to be Diamond David.
Psychiatrist to the strong.
Diamond is something, by the way, that you are making up. I don't know why you'd say diamond.
Dr. Puder never said any such thing.
You're bright and hard and alluring
So bad.
and highly sought after.
Listen, I hope we make it. I want to say one more really quick, serious thing. That I hope that people listen to this show and listen to the last show we did with Puder and even other shows where Scott and I have talked about counseling and therapy. We can take some of that and make it okay. Like, it needs to be okay to go get therapy. It doesn't mean you're sick. It doesn't mean you're broken. By the way, I think everybody's broken anyway, right? It's so, but
These Calvinists.
one of the things that's important to me that might be the only long-lasting legacy that my dad is leaving my brother and my sister and myself was that he was the guy that made it okay to go get help. He needed help. My dad was mentally ill, and we didn't have any of that in my family, at least that we knew of before him. And that generation really from us, from like the older generation X through the baby boomers, there is this stigma that comes with going and getting help. And it's been one of the most freeing things that I've done in my life in the past decade is making it so that my dad made it so that it was okay to go get help. And he made it okay. And then my brother went on a fishing trip with my dad one day. My brother was really struggling with his growing business and the issues. And my dad said, son, it's okay to go get help. And my brother went and got help. And then 3 years later, I needed help. And I called my brother because my brother was one of these friends that we talked about that we had all these things and it was safe. And I was like, Chris, I don't know what to do. And Chris said, you got to go get help. I've got a number. Let me get a number. And I went and got help. And it makes a difference. And so get rid of the stigma, right? Like if you're that person that's depressed, if you're that person that is perceiving isolation, that you don't feel like anybody gives a shit about you and no one is empathetic towards you, like just go get help. It's okay. It is so freeing to do that.
You know, we go to the dentist to get our teeth cleaned, and we go to the barber, and we get our hair cut, and we get our oil changed. Go to the damn counselor.
Yeah.
Would you please?
Yeah, it's made a huge difference in my life. And I know Scott and I have talked about this privately off the air many times. And so I'm thankful for people like you, Dr. Puder, that have given their life to helping other people. Man, we need more people like you.
Yeah, but not too many. I mean, we really need to get some things done. And he's over there empathizing too much. Like we have to build bridges. And I mean, there's stuff that needs to be done.
Oh, man. It was like, Matt, that was like a really beautiful, I mean, you're tearing up. You're tearing up talking about it. You're passionate about it. And for good reason, you know? There's a lot of people who will suffer alone and they will not get help, even after, unfortunately, listening to that. And that's too bad. You know, exercise, therapy, sleep, eat healthy, that can help the majority of people.
That's right.
It really can. Getting therapy, you know, and I would say find a therapist that you can connect with, okay? Find someone that you feel heard by and give it 20 sessions and just show up weekly. Don't expect much. Just give it 20 sessions and see if you can work through whatever comes up into your mind in the sessions. Report it to them and see what happens.
Yeah. Nothing worse is going to happen.
That's right.
Yeah, go give it a shot. There is another Barbell Logic podcast. We cry in almost every episode. I cried about True Grit, the movie, this morning.
It was me this time. That's true. Scott cried like crazy over True Grit. Went and saw True Grit with John Wayne and just teared up like a baby this morning recording podcasts. And here I am.
Oh, man.
It slayed me, man.
So good.
No, it's good.
There's another show. Thank you, Dr. Puder, for doing this. Go listen to David's show. It's the
Psychotherapy
and Psychiatry podcast. I always get mixed up. You can also follow him on his YouTube channel, and you can follow him. You can go look him up on Insta. He's easy to find, and he shares good stuff there and interacts with his people a lot. Anything else you want to say there, sir?
We would love to make you a regular guest on this show. I think it's good, right? You come for the barbells and you stay for the lifestyle stuff sometimes. And so if you'll be a guest, we would love to have you.
Great. I would love it. I appreciate you guys.
I'm trying to be a podcast pimp and have like a whole stable
of good guests. No, I mean, it's true. Like, it's just, you get these guests and you're just like, sometimes you're like, man, this is so good. And the reality is there are some people who either for whatever reason, they just will not go see a therapist after that, or maybe they literally cannot afford a decent therapist. And that this may be it may take 5 episodes with Dr. Puder before it finally sort of breaks through and like, okay, listen, this was really good. Dr. Puder wasn't actually talking to me. He was talking to Matt and Scott on a podcast. I want to be able to talk to somebody like that. And it may take 4, 5, 6, 7, 10 episodes with you to be able to actually break through to some people. I get it. And so I think you provide a tremendous amount of value to our listeners outside of the realm of how to program your squat in intermediate and advanced training. There's other things that are more important.
Yeah. So boring anyway.
This stuff's so good. I like it because it's like free psychotherapy for us. We get to sit here and we get Puder for an hour, and I don't have to pay him I don't have to write him the check.
You go downstairs and Rachel's like, what's wrong? You're like, oh, I got the Puder.
That's right. I just love you so much.
I got the Puder.
Oh, man, you guys are kind.
I'll just dote on my wife all night, and I'll just give her all this affection and attention.
What's going on with you?
She's like, Puder,
Wait a minute. Is that your Rachel Reynolds impression?
Yeah, right.
I don't know her.
He's like, he married a Missouri girl. That must be the way she talks.
Oh, man.
Or Missouri, as all the politicians. And by the way, if you say Missouri to me, I promise you, if you say Missouri to me, we will never have a connection. We will not be friends. I will not empathize with a thing you ever say if you ever use the word Missouri, because
Missouri.
No one in this state.
Did you just do a bump of Coke? What was that you rubbed on your gums?
No, it's my snot on my.
No, it was David.
Oh, David.
I got some hummus here, guys.
Oh, God. Either one would have been super California. Like if you did a bump of Coke and rub that on your gums, or hummus.
Oh, man. Good times.
So, no, thanks for doing the show, dude. I appreciate it. It's been great, as always.
Hey, clean living, David. Rubbing that hummus on your gums. There's another Barbell Logic podcast. What's that, David?
Oh, I'm
If
saying.
you got any questions you want us to answer, you can leave this. Go ahead.
Oh man. Okay, I was going to say, if anyone's a Game of Thrones fan, I'm doing some Game of Thrones analysis on my Instagram.
Oh.
Where we watch clips and I teach people how to do some empathy and some psychological stuff that's going on in the clips.
Yeah.
So that's kind
don't
of
let Scott
a new
talk.
thing.
That show's the best show of all time. It's amazing. That show is absolutely incredible. It has now dethroned Breaking Bad for me as the best show ever.
Oh man. That's
the correct.
good.
It's the correct answer is The Sopranos. Thanks for listening, guys.
Ready to go.
Good
Slap on
times.
the butt. Here we go.
All right. Bye, guys. Thank you.